So you have these dispersed eras of persecution, but that really comes to its fruition and head under Diocletian, where he's like, I'm going to wipe these guys off.
The turn to Christianity is what really fascinates me, and it's something I have a lot more to learn about, but I've looked at it a bunch already, and I'd love to have some people in here who are some experts on it. But you have this Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. It was like
325.
Yeah, 325. So this is where my brain wires get like blocked a little bit, because you have a power structure, the Roman government led by the emperor, who now sees this new growing idea where there's many Christians within his empire, and he's going, oh shit, we're having trouble putting a button on this. Like, they really believe in this guy Jesus Christ and what happened, and by the way, we kind of put him to death. That's not a good look. So they have this big meeting with a lot of different people, and they dictate, guess what? We are now the Holy Roman Empire. We believe in Christianity, and here's everything that happened. And the question is, you have power-hungry men in this meeting,
Sure,
who are now dictating, taking legitimate pieces of history, but deciding what we're going to tell the public about, or what we're going to make the book. And the reason I bring this up is because within this meeting and subsequent, practicing of the religion throughout the empire afterwards, there was a decision made where these are the 4 gospels we use, not these other gospels that we found as well. And one of the alleged gospels there, but all of them are interesting, is that, like Mary Magdalene had a gospel, and she's not written about in great terms, or at least in implied great terms, in the 4 gospels they chose, as opposed to in her gospel and in other gospels written, it's like, yo, she wasn't like a whore. She was Jesus's companion, perhaps his wife, and then it gets into like, oh, does Jesus have a kid or something like that? That's kind of a step farther. But like, what do you make of the fact that the religion, which you are not a part of the Catholic Church, right? You're a part of Protestant, but all
part of my heritage.
Exactly. Yeah. All Christianity branched off from that. That's where we'll get to Martin Luther later. I wanted to put a pin in that. But like, what do you think of the fact that like there are political power structures that took this history and decided what people are going to see, and then basically said, this is why we believe that way? Because they also at this meeting allegedly decided we're going to make Jesus divine, even though I agree with you. I think that there's historical evidence before that points to people saying, oh yeah, no, he is divine. He did rise from the dead.
So some corrective history there. Okay. So you had a period of persecution which was dispersed that started basically right away. I mean, Nero, who was one of the Roman emperors in the 1st century, is famous for burning Christians to light his gardens paths.
His gardens?
Yeah, he would burn them as torches. And the Christians were these really easy targets because they were these unusual people who became a really easy target for like a scapegoat for the problems.
Wait, so he would hold on a minute. I'm still stuck on the garden thing.
Yeah.
So would he like stick them on a stake and hold them like a tiki torch?
Yeah. The story is that they would be tied to stakes along the rows of his gardens, and then they would be lit the gardens at night. But remember, this is the guy who burned Rome, right? He was understandably
he was a real
crazy.
Motherfucker. Yeah.
He was known to be a little bit nuts, as were some other Roman emperors.
Sure.
So you have this era of persecution, but it's really dispersed. So it's worse in some places, better in others. So it's a few emperors before Constantine. You have a guy named Diocletian, and Diocletian has a universal era of persecution. Now, even before that, so one of our earliest mentions of Christianity outside of the Bible from an imperial source is a letter from Pliny the Younger to the Emperor Trajan, because you have these people running around who are calling themselves Christians, and the Roman government system is trying to figure out what to do with them, because they're saying very strange things. They're saying things like, your gods don't exist. And this doesn't bow well under the ancient culture of Greco-Roman antiquity. And so I mentioned before, they become easy scapegoats. There's an ancient historian named Tertullian, and he has this line where he says, if the Nile River is too high, or the Tiber River, which is the river in Rome, is too low, the cry will ring out, the Christians to the lions. And the reason for that is because when there are, say, famines or floods or things like that, and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, why might this have happened? one thing you can point to is where there are these crazy religious people running around saying that the gods don't exist. And so if I'm in Athens and there are people saying that Athena doesn't exist, that's probably ticking Athena off. And so why might there be a flood? Well, it's because of these guys. So they were an easy target for persecution. And in fact, when Pliny the Younger writes to Trajan, he says, I don't know what to do with these people. I torture them, and they don't,
They keep going.
yeah. And he basically is saying like, hey, Emperor, am I doing everything right? And he's like, yes, you're doing everything right. And so we have this kind of evidence of persecution. And actually, that's an important letter because early on, he says, these people they meet early in the morning, and they sing a hymn as Christ to a god. And so we have this kind of early evidence of people already worshiping Jesus as God under very early on within that time period. But so you have these dispersed eras of persecution, but that really comes to its fruition and head under Diocletian, where he's like, I'm going to wipe these guys off. And so he's, he institutes this system where you have to, in order to buy and sell, you have to go into the equivalent of your local town hall, and you have to take a pinch of incense, and you have to offer it as an offering on the altar of Caesar, and you have to say the words "Kaiser et Kyrios," Caesar is Lord. And the reason they did this specifically was because one of the earliest confessions of the Christian faith was Jesu Kyrios, Jesus is Lord, and so they knew that Christians, if they were believing Christians, would not say this. But if you don't say it, you don't get this piece of paper that they called a libellus. And if you didn't have a libellus, you couldn't buy or sell. And so this was one of the ways, along with, weeding out people who they thought might be Christians, throwing them in prison.
So people would, hold on a minute. So people wouldn't say that to pass. And I don't mean to be nonchalant about it, but I would think if I were a Christian, yes, it feels sacrilegious to not say that in that way and say someone else is Lord. But I would also think, and I'm trying to put myself in their shoes, okay, if I live my life practicing the teachings of Jesus and I'm a good Christian and whatever, and this empire is trying to persecute me and potentially kill me, meaning I'm not going to be able to continue to spread the good word or whatever, if I'm dead, I feel like Jesus would let you say something else just to kind of pass off, but they didn't feel that way.
No, I mean, Paul in his letter says to live is Christ and to die is gain. Because if you are a Christian, if you truly believe that Jesus is who he says he is, then he died for you. You can live for him, but ultimately he paid the ultimate sacrifice on your behalf, dying on the cross and taking your sins. You dying as a confession of your faith, becoming a martyr, not that you're pursuing martyrdom. The early Christians weren't pursuing martyrdom, but they weren't afraid of martyrdom either.
Right.
And so this was the perspective of early Christians, and it actually became a controversy because some Christians did have the perspective that you're articulating, where they would say, yeah, sure, I said Caesar is Lord, but I didn't really mean it. Or sure, they asked me if I had, say, Christian documents, and I did, but I lied for the sake of, carrying on these documents. Now, Constantine, before his conversion, he decriminalizes a bunch of things, including during the Edict of Milan in 312 AD, he decriminalizes Christianity. Now, he doesn't do that solely, but in part and parcel to some of the other stuff that he's decriminalizing with the Edict of Tolerance, Christianity gets lumped in there. And now, all of a sudden, it's no longer illegal to be a Christian. And so the Christians are coming out of the woodwork, and this actually becomes a controversy within the church called the Donatist controversy, where you
Donatist?
Donatist. And part of that is that there was a group of people who had, say, not given up Christian documents, who maybe were a little bit glib with the truth in terms of, are you a Christian? And they maybe weren't as transparent. And they were called the Trottadors. And this is actually where we get the word traitor from.
Yeah.
And now they're all part of groups of church communities. And remember, church in Greek, just ekklesia, just means congregation. So they're part of these congregations, these local congregations. But there are these other groups who have said that they're going to give up Christ and say, well, we didn't really mean it. But then there are also people who have come out of prison, who have lost limbs for their faith or have had family members who died as martyrs. And this becomes a big problem in the church. And so they have to figure it out. And it's one of the earliest controversies that took place. It's called the Donatist controversy.
Yeah, I pulled this up while you were saying. I just want to read this so people have background. Donatism was I guess it became a Christian sect leading to a schism in the church in the region of the Church of Carthage from the 4th to the 6th centuries. Donatists argued the Christian clergy must be faultless for their ministry to be effective and their prayers and sacraments to be valid. Donatism had its roots in the long-established Christian community of the Roman province, Africa, Proconsularis, present-day Tunisia, the northeast of Algeria, and the western coast of Libya, and Mauritania, Tingitana, roughly with the northern part of present-day Morocco, in the persecutions of Christians under Diocletian. Named after the Berber Christian bishop Donatus Magnus, Donatism flourished during the 4th and 5th centuries. Donatism mainly spread among the indigenous Berber population, and Donatists were able to blend Christianity with many of the Berber local customs. So it's an offshoot, but they had a clear at the front end different idea on I guess how the church is supposed to be carried out.
Well, it was particularly what happens if you have an elder within your local congregation who, say, has baptized you, but they offered an inch of incense. Sorry, I didn't say that right. Offered a pinch of incense, easy for me to say,
there you go,
on the altar of Caesar. Is your baptism legitimate? That was the question in terms of that. And so part of this theological question was, where is the power of your baptism? Is it in your confession of faith and the actual immersion, or is it in the person who has been set aside as clergy who has done this to you?
Yes.
Because you had these individuals who they didn't become martyrs when maybe the other groups thought they should become martyrs, and now they're leaders in the church. So that was part of this Donatist controversy. Now, this is all leading up to the Council of Nicaea, remember?
Yes.
So you have...
I was waiting in anticipation.
Yeah, I know.
I could see the timeline.
Let me just say right off the bat, the Council of Nicaea, the reason it was called was to deal with an issue called Arianism. So there was a guy named Arius who was a minister in North Africa, and he believed that Jesus was God, but he believed that Jesus was created by the Father and the Godhead. So
Godhead?
Yeah. So in Trinitarian belief, the Godhead is usually the term that's referred to as, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay. In the one being of God, there are three co-equal, co-eternal persons, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. So that's sometimes referred to as the Godhead.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here